Entrepreneurs have a tendency of falling in love with the solution instead of falling in love with the problem. Because when you're in love with the problem, you're constantly innovating. Whereas when you're in love with the solution, you're stuck in a box only with that solution.
Daniel,
Yes.
the best dressed person on my podcast.
I don't know about that. I mean, look at yourself. You've set the standard high, so we try and live up to that. Yeah.
If you could rate your overall well-being on a scale of
Yeah.
1 to 10
Yeah.
currently, what would it be?
It's a good 6.5, 7. Yeah.
And give me a reason why.
Given a reason why, it's because on a personal level, I've recently become a dad. So dads on its own brings a lot of happiness. Okay, despite the sleep deprivation and all that, it's something that happens to you as a human, as a parent. That's seeing your child smile and seeing them happy makes you happy, a happier person. And at least that's my own experience. And then on the professional level, work is doing all right. So I'm feeling I'm in a good headspace at the moment. Yeah.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love to hear that. And once more, congratulations
Thank
on the
you.
newborn.
Thank you very much.
So I want to go back. You were born in the DRC.
Correct.
So tell us about what was it like growing up there?
Hmm.
If you could give me some memorable stories
Yes.
for our South African
Totally.
audience.
Totally. That's a very interesting question, because that actually is going to help you understand a lot of the decisions that I'm making now, my thinking pattern and things like that. If you really want to know about a person's way of doing life, go back to their roots, right? So that's a good question to start with. What I can remember is that the struggles that we encountered, it really was really a blessing for us, because people tend to think of struggle always on the negative spectrum, but struggle, I've come to realize that it is a blessing sometimes, because without struggle, you can't have a certain mindset. All right, it's a make and break type of thing. So growing up, my parents were well off when I was born, and then after some times the economy went down and things became a little bit challenging. So growing up, we had to become entrepreneurial and think outside the box really quickly. So that's in its own, I've seen my own brother build an entire baking oven, design it and build it like almost industrial size in the backyard, and started baking so that we can sell stuff. And I've seen my parents open small businesses on the side, and that's on its own. Just observing that the way they handle that situations, it does something to your mind as a child. It's a lesson on its own. Without them telling you that when life throws you a curveball, you don't roll down. You rise up to the challenge, and you think outside the box. You take initiative. So in a nutshell, so there was a time of extreme hardship and poverty, where the government could not take care of the general
And
population.
what year was this? What
So
period was this?
this was probably around 1993, 1994, around that time. I should have been, I'm giving my age, probably around 4 or 5 years, yeah, something like that. Yeah, so that's how I was born, and then from there things got a bit better, and we could then go back to the old ways in terms of like just depending on my parents' salary, because both of them were working, both my parents were working. So even when things kind of improved, we couldn't go back on just depending on their salaries as a means of survival. And us as children, we continue with that mindset. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It sounded like there's two ways you can take it, actually.
Mhm.
If you go through suffering, in my opinion,
Yeah.
you can become a victim
Yes.
and blame. Or if you go through suffering, you can ask yourself, what's the opportunity here?
Yes.
So it's almost like you said to yourself, what's the opportunity here?
Exactly.
How can I learn? How can I grow? And I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah.
Do you think that that was because of your parents? Like, how did you develop that mindset to
Yes.
actually see it as opportunity?
Yes. So you see, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if it was directly linked to that, or if it was something that was just innate, and that's the old question of, is entrepreneurship a special gene that people are born with, or is it a transferable skill, right? But for me, as I grew up, I remember vividly being in primary school and saving up money and stuff. And I went and put myself a nice wallet. As I got back home, one of my siblings was like, "That's a nice wallet. I would like to have one of those." In my head, being a child, I don't know, 6, 7 year old, 8 year old or something like that, I was like, you know what, you can have it. And then I added interest on it. So I sold him the wallet for a higher price, almost double. But because he lacked it and he did not know the original price of the things and he could afford it, he bought it. Next thing, another. So I went and bought another one, and I still had some spare change. I came back home, another sibling was like, "Oh, I actually like this. This is a different design. I like this. Like, you can have it." And I sold it to them, and then without knowing, I had product market fit. So there was demand, there was technological feasibility and financial viability. Without knowing it, I had a successful business like that. So I had a few moments like that, and that I can look back and said, "Oh, that moment, perhaps that was the moment where the entrepreneur in me was born." I'm not entirely sure. Or was it when I observed my parent, how they dealt with, hardship? I'm not entirely sure. Yes, but it definitely influenced my thinking for sure.
And what made you move to South Africa?
Yes. So what made me move to South Africa primarily was to further my studies at the tertiary level. I had just completed my matric. I had spent a year at the University of Lubumbashi studying engineering there. Then, then I realized that just the level of education at the tertiary level was not up to what I had aspired to in terms of my ambitions and my goals. And if I wanted to become the top in my industry, I had to go to better institutions. So I had an opportunity to come to South Africa because I had siblings that were already here before me. The year was 2009. I arrived here with little to no English at all, because mind you, I come from a French-speaking country. And so I took a gap year just learning English on my own, reading books and listening to a lot of tapes and cassette tapes and repeating stuff out loud. After that, I joined university, Stellenbosch University. Yeah, so that's when I came. And yeah, that was an interesting journey on its own, right? Because you can't say after a year that you've mastered the language. So I was still learning English. And Stellenbosch University at the time was very bilingual, meaning Afrikaans and English. And the engineering faculty specifically was extremely bilingual in the sense that from your third year onwards, lectures were strictly in Afrikaans. But from the first 2 years, you had the choice to choose, the language. And so one of the criteria to be admitted, well, not really the criteria, one of the things that you had to do when applying for engineering faculty at the time was to write an Afrikaans test. So imagine this.
I remember those.
Yes. So imagine this Congolese, I don't know, 20-something-year-old going to this first year and writing an Afrikaans test, a language that you're hearing for the first time. So I literally just wrote my name down. That was it. And obviously that qualified me to take an extra module in Afrikaans class, where they introduced us to the basics of Afrikaans so that we'll be able to at least understand when the lecturer is teaching. So yeah, so that helped me actually to have the basics of Afrikaans and just survive in this Afrikaans dominated environment. Yes.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Maloba Consulting. If you're an inspiring entrepreneur with a fire in your belly and a brilliant idea in your mind, they are your ultimate launchpad to success. Introducing the Starter Pack, your all-in-one ticket to turn your passion-fueled concept into a thriving business. So what's inside the Starter Pack? A strategic blueprint, legal guardianship, financial help, pitch decks, and so much more. The first 15 visionaries to reach out will receive an exclusive consultation absolutely free. Contact Maloba Consulting for more information. So growing up and being exposed to this entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial environment,
Yes.
what made you choose to study engineering?
Interesting. So, to be quite honest with you, I was good at maths and physics and chemistry. So initially, I had two options. I was considering doing medicine or engineering, right? And when I came to South Africa, being a foreigner, doing medicine is a bit challenging. So you can't just apply as a foreigner, especially coming from a French-speaking country. into medicine at the time. I'm not sure if things have changed now. Wanted to do 1 year of science or something like that before transitioning into that. So I did not want to waste another year. And so I was like, cool, I'm doing engineering, I guess. And that's how I did engineering. But it was also heavily influenced by my older brother who had done engineering as well. Someone that's always looked up to as a model. I was like, cool, I like what he's doing. I can do what he's doing as well. So yeah, that's how I chose engineering. Yeah.
So, besides the language barrier,
Yes.
was it also difficult to come to another country
Hmm.
and adjust
Yes.
while studying a really difficult degree?
Yes. Oh,
What
yes.
what other challenges
Oh,
came
yes,
about?
absolutely. There's definitely a cultural shock, because the way people do life is slightly different, right? The way people engage with one another is slightly different. And at the time, so the country was a little bit leaning toward a bit of xenophobia. There was some unrest in that sense. So that posed a threat as well to any non national right citizen. So making you feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit unsafe. But beside that, some when you pass the first layer, of being like a stranger to someone, you realize that there's a lot of similarities, right? People are only different the first time you meet them. The more you spend time with them, you realize that you're not that different at all, right? So that was a challenge, but language played a major role, right? In a sense that for you to fit in any cultural setting, social settings, I think being able to speak the language is an advantage. And you would find yourself in a settings where English is not the preferred language, but that's the only language you can speak. So it makes you feel a little bit like an outsider. And yeah, regardless of the race, right? People had different preferences. So that was a challenge in that sense, in terms of even just making friends and making connections and just, yeah, being accommodated to the new way of doing things. Yes,
And how did you overcome those challenges?
it's a mental thing, right? It's exactly what you said at the beginning. I think it goes back to where I come from. My mentality is very different. When I see a challenge, an obstacle, my first instinct is not to go into victimhood. My first instinct is to think, okay, how can I overcome this outside the box? So for me, it was something as simple as learning basic phrases just so I can gain somebody's trust. Then once somebody can smile and say, I can hear you speaking with a funny accent, fine, let's switch to English. That's a way of overcoming that language barrier, for instance. And then people like, okay, you're trying, we like that, we'll teach you that type of thing. So that for me worked for me in that sense. So yeah, cool. It's just about showing people that you really care about their culture, about who they are, and you're willing to make an effort. And when people see that, I think they're willing to reward it by accepting you. Yeah,
I love that.
yeah,
Actually taking in an interest,
correct.
and that person that those people will
Yes,
reflect that
yes,
back to you.
totally.
Oh,
It's
amazing.
it's a skill that I use even in my networking settings. It's usually people make the mistake of going to someone they're interested in and say, "Oh, hey, look, I'm interested in you. Would you please mentor me or do something for me and stuff like that?" That's a wrong way to go about it, right? You approach someone and said, "I love the work you're doing. I've been following you, and I think I can add this input to you. I think I can help you." This offer them something before you ask anything in return, so that they can see that you're valuable to them as well, right? It's not just about them feeling like, oh, another person was trying to suck from my energy and things like that. But the moment I start looking at you as like, this person could be an asset to me, it's actually valuable to me. I also want to spend time with you. I also want to get to know you. So it's the same principle when it comes to, overcoming these social barriers. It's just showing interest. It's like, hey man, besides language barrier, you can actually learn from me as well.
Were you taught this, or
No,
how did you learn?
so I had to learn this growing up. So the DRC, you have to understand. In fact, I've noticed this across other African countries, up north. Because of the struggle, there's a certain level of competitiveness that's just natural, right? It's almost survival of the fittest. And so your survival instincts need to are almost really be trained as you're growing up, whether being in high school, to not be bullied, things like that, or whether being in a social environment it was very competitive because everybody's trying to survive. Everybody is thinking almost about the same thing at the same time. So learning how to think quickly and having these survival instincts definitely help you, right? So I can say society taught me because growing up, we constantly had to overcome these hurdles, whether it be in the social settings, whether it be anywhere else, you had to be competitive with kids your own age, with people older than you. You had to be competitive. So yes, that comes from that struggle indeed. Yes.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And while you were studying
Yes.
throughout your journey, you did not finish your degree in
In
the
record time,
in
no.
in record
No,
time. So you actually took a bit of a break.
that's
Could you
correct.
walk us through what you were doing
Yes.
and why?
Exactly. So the first time I took a break was in 2012. There were some visa issues, so I had to travel back home to renew my visa. But when I got there were some family issues that I had to take care of, or that prevented me to come back immediately. So I only came back in 2014, and 2014 academically things did not go very well for me because of the trauma that I experienced back home due to the family challenges that we just gone through. I just lost a brother, and so that experience for me, I had not recovered from it nicely. And so 2014 did not go here. I had to, the university politely asked me to take a break. So in that moment, I realized as well that there were some financial issues in terms of covering tuition fees, and I did not want to be a strain on my parents. I decided to work for myself, save enough before I returned to varsity. So that's exactly what I did. I took a long gap year. I worked, but of course, while I worked, I also continued educating myself and things like that, and saved enough. Came back 4 years later in 2018. Yes.
How did you deal with the loss of your brother?
Oof, I took it badly. I took it really badly because being yeah, it was very young, right, and full of potential, and we were very
Younger
young.
than you
No,
at
no,
the
no. He was
time?
he was older than me. Yeah,
Okay.
he was older than me, but he was young. In the sense that he was not even in his 30s yet. Yeah. So it was one of those things like you see, mortality is something that hits you in the face, and just you never think that it applies to you until it happens, right? You feel compassionate for other people, sympathetic for other people when it happens to them, but never once you think that it could happen to you or someone close to you. So when it happened, I did not know how to deal with it. It affected my spiritual journey. It just affected my whole balance as a human being. It took me some time to come back, but I've always been rooted in spirituality, right? In my faith, my Christian faith, and so it was a slow recovery process. And what I like is that family, friends, and people were supportive, and a church community as well. People kind of just giving you the space, to go through the process. And yeah, slowly, yeah, I came back to the realization that there's more layers to life than what we think, and death is not the end. It's a matter of what you believe in terms of what it means. Yes,
And was there added responsibility placed on you
in terms
in any
of
way from your family of having to maybe fulfill the role of your brother?
no, not at all, not at all. It's more like in African families, being a male, there's people almost, I don't know, how do I put it? It's almost look to you to pay forward certain things, right? So it's like parents are investing in you so that by the time you finish your studies, get a job, you're able to pay it forward in a sense and help somebody else and that thing like that. And he was in a position where he was able to pay it forward, right? And then it was no longer to do that. So obviously, to some extent, people kind of look at you as being next in line. It's like, okay, you kind of have to make it happen so that you can contribute as well and help and things like that. But at no point was there any pressure in a sense that, okay, you have to do A, B, C, and D. It was more, I personally felt guilty. Nobody said anything to me, but I just felt like, okay, I need to step up. That's why I said to my parents, like, don't worry about my tuition fees. I'll take care of it myself. That type of things. Nobody came to me and said, okay, now you have to do A, B, C, and D. It's just I just felt like, okay, I need to now step up and do maybe more. Yes.
Definitely resonate with that.
Okay.
When I was studying in my second or third
Yeah.
year it was,
Yeah.
I lost a cousin who also was very close,
Yeah.
and he was just 23 at the time.
Yeah.
And when you lose someone that's so young with so much of potential,
Yeah.
someone that means so much to you, someone
Exactly.
that means so much to your family,
Yeah.
and you see the effects it has on them,
Yeah.
it changes the way you think. It changes the
Totally.
way you perceive life.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that.
No, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And you definitely spot on. Exactly. And that's why I say it's like mortality as a way of slapping you in the face is somehow, right? It's like at that point you start realizing, okay, we on the clock. As well. Not to be like, all cynical and things like that, but it's just you realize that yes, you don't know when, your clock is going to run out. But the time that you have, make it count, right? You can't just be living carefree and careless because you think you are young. We are young, and so we can just live with as if there's no consequences. All of a sudden, there's a sense of responsibility and said, I want my life to be a bit more meaningful, right? To make more sense because I'm given this opportunity to still stay on earth. So I want to make it count. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, he was one of the biggest reasons why I started my first business.
yeah,
Just being so inspired
yeah,
by him as a person and his life
totally.
resulted in me taking action and starting my first business.
Sure.
So when you got back to South Africa,
Yes.
what did you actually do to pay for your studies? How did you find a
So
job and
yeah, definitely. I got a job. I started working as a as a data steward, right? So we were handling calls and managing data for a healthcare um, call center, and I did that. But that was an interesting phase in my life because the more I did that, the more I realized that I was meant for more. In the sense that not to look down on anybody who does that type of job, but in terms, I remember vividly every time I would feel a little bit bored and not challenged intellectually. So I remember this one time going to my supervisor and it's like, look, this routine of doing the same thing over and over again, it's just literally killing me, right? I have a proposition. I want to start the project. And can we do A, B, C, and D to improve that, and that? Has anybody ever considered that? And you know how it is with corporates. People will be like, nah, nobody has ever done that. Go for it if you want to, but just make sure you continue reaching your daily targets. It's like, don't worry about it. For me, that was a nice way of challenging myself, because you come from a background where you are constantly challenged, and all of a sudden you put in an environment where it's dull, it's just routine. There's not being challenged at any level. That kills you as a person. As a result, you lose motivation in what you're doing and you start underperforming. Not because you're not capable, it's just because you don't feel challenged enough. And so I still strive to underperform, but every day getting out of bed, going to that job was a nightmare because I was like, yes, I have to go through this routine again, and that's how people get stressed and eventually burn out, getting depressed and stuff like that. And I say to myself, this is not going to happen to me. But if I continue on this path, I might end up being depressed. So I started initiating projects like that, and yeah, that's how I coped with that.
and was that during your studies? Did you eventually um
No, so that was during the break, right? During the break, during the 4 years that I took, just working and saving up, I did a number of things, and that was one of the things that I did. So by the time I came back, I was only working during the holidays, right? So I would do small jobs during the holidays and things like that. Working as a software developer here and there, writing some codes, and getting paid for it, that type of things, right? But the key was just to keep that income flowing, and because that was another challenge on its own coming back, because when you enter the workforce, especially the corporate environment, your lifestyle changes. You all of a sudden there's an income that's regular that comes, right? Your priority shifts, and you're used to receiving money now. And going back full time as a student, it's not the same income that starts flowing every month. All of a sudden, things become a little bit, so it's a bit difficult. And I remember at some point, people advising me, it's like, you already have a job and there's regular income. Why do you want to go back to school? Right. And so that was another challenge for myself, because
who was telling you this?
you would be shocked. Actually, people, familiar people. family members and close friend. You would think that this is random people that will tell you, but these are actually close people. It comes from a good place because they think you're making a mistake and they're trying to help you not make that mistake by giving you some advice. Whereas
But they don't see what you
they
see.
don't see what you see at all, and they don't feel what you feel being in that environment. And so at some point, I remember initially I would try to defend myself and explain myself. And at some point, I realized that I don't owe anybody any explanation, right? I know the vision that I have. I know where I want to be by when, and I know what I need to do. And so it gets to a point where in life you need to be your own motivational speaker, right? You need to be able to learn how to self-motivate. You can't depend on external motivation. If you get to a point where you learn how to self-motivate, then every day when you wake up, there's new challenges and you know how to motivate yourself. And it helps to have a goal and a vision and focus on that. For me, I had a goal, I had a vision, and I knew where I wanted to be. Right. Yes.
And how does one self-motivate themselves? Where do they start?
It starts with a vision. Somebody said this actually nicely. Dr. Miles Monroe. He said, if you don't know where you're going, anywhere looks like your destination. And that's the problem, right? It's like if you imagine you're driving down the N1, so many exits, left, right, left, right, left, right. But if you don't know where you're going, any exit is a good exit, but it's not the right exit for you. But if you know exactly where you're going, you know what the right exit is. All these exits are good, but they might not be the right exit for you. And so it's the same thing. That's how you self-motivate, because the moment your vision is that clear, it becomes easy for you to say no to certain things and yes to other things. Your decision making becomes very clear because it has to answer the simple question: is this aligned with my vision? Is this contributing to me getting closer to my vision? If the answer is no, then I'm not entertaining it. It's an easy decision. If the answer is yes, then of course, yes, let's do this. Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
After finishing your studies,
Yes.
you eventually start working at Launch Lab,
Correct.
which is an incubator.
Yes.
So could you walk us through some memorable lessons that you learned working at this incubator?
Absolutely. Yes. I think lessons. Let me first start by sharing a little bit of my experience. I think working in an incubator was definitely a good thing for me. By the time and again, coming back to what I've just said now, knowing your vision, by the time I was about to join the Launch Lab, I had another job offer, very good at a very good firm as a software engineer. So I had to make a hard choice of pursuing my career as an engineer or shifting gears and making an 180-degree turn into venture building, which had nothing to do with my educational background, right? But which had everything to do with my vision, with my calling. So that was a tough choice to make at the time. But then again, I was able to make that choice because of the vision. I knew clearly what I wanted to do in life, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And so I joined the Launch Lab, long story short. And when I joined the Launch Lab, being in the startup environment, seeing like-minded people, meeting people like such as yourself, for instance, has definitely been very rewarding, right? Because you realize quickly that you feed off of each other energy, and it challenges you. So that would be some of my memorable moments. And also being in a startup environment, you don't have a fixed role, which definitely worked well with my personality and helped me not being bored. Remember, I told you that I was bored in the corporate setting because of routine. Whereas in a startup environment, things change all the time. My role at the Launch Lab has changed so many times, right? And that's pretty cool, right? Because you learn
Could you
different things.
walk us through some of your memorable projects that you worked on or workshops and, what made it so rewarding?
Absolutely. I think the most memorable one was a project called Raise Nova. Raise Nova, this is literally my employer at the time came to me with saying that, okay, your role has shifted. Now you're going to be in charge with student entrepreneurs. Anything that has to do with student entrepreneurship, that's on you. And so make it work. That was it in terms of instructions. And then I like that because for me, it's like a blank canvas. And so I get to draw, I get to use my imagination. And I started using design thinking, obviously, to kind of validate hypotheses that I had. Okay. You start with an assumption, thinking that this is a problem. And Yes, and that's the mistake most people make even while building a business. It's the same thing with a small project. You start with an assumption, but you need to have it validated. And so I went through that process engaging with a lot of students, and I realized that there was a need for a program that is suited for students. I realized that most of the programs that we had at the incubator here at the Launch Lab were a bit tailor-made for entrepreneurs that passed that stage or were not in that phase of being a student. It's a different thing where you're done with your studies. It's a different things where you don't have to worry about academics and have to commit to an incubator, to a certain training program. Your time and your income and your stress level is very different. So as we needed to have something different that made sense for students. So I came up with this program called Res Nova. It's actually Latin, which means innovation, right? And from the name to the curriculum design to everything, that was a very rewarding exercise because I got to engage with a lot of students, and you'll be surprised how much talent is out here and how much innovative ideas are out here. But people, students, especially students, are scared to just take a bold step and work on those ideas. So yeah, that was very rewarding engaging with students and realizing the potential that lies here and creating this project and actually running it. Yes.
And working with a bunch of founders, student entrepreneurs, what did you learn from these founders?
Yes. So what I've learned is that there's a common thread, for instance, especially there's different type of founders or entrepreneurs. There are those, especially those in the ideation phase, what they have this grand idea, right? And they have certain hypotheses. And there are those who have launched already and have started running maybe for some time. Maybe they're chasing after an MVP or they just got an MVP. So those who are in the ideation phase, the common thread that I've noticed as a venture builder is that when people come to you, they share to you their vision, their passion. For one, they're convinced that their idea is the best idea in the world. And then number two, they think that all they need is funding. It's like, if you can just give me money, I'm going to change the world. It's like we taking the world by storm. So that's the one thing. And then those who are already established, they are more concerned with, for them, success, the way they've defined success, it's only in terms of turnover. If you can help them increase their revenue and increase their turnover, then they're successful. You see, that's for me already there's something wrong there because success can be defined very differently. Success could be pivoting, right? Realizing that your business model is not right, right? Steve Blanks, how these Steve Blanks defined pivoting is like if you're able to change your business model without firing your team, that's pivoting. So you could be chasing after the wrong thing. And somebody actually said it quite nicely. I can't remember who. They said entrepreneurs have a tendency of falling in love with the solution instead of falling in love with the problem. Because when you're in love with the problem, you're constantly innovating. Whereas when you're in love with the solution, you're stuck in a box only with that solution. So that's some of the lessons that I've learned, common mistakes that most entrepreneurs make. The first thing you need is not money to validate your ideas. The first thing you need is customer discovery, empathy building. And secondly, you need to revisit your definition of success as an entrepreneur.
We're going to get into the startup package.
Yes.
But I first want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, which is your vision.
Yes.
You speak about this vision. So I want to know, where did it come from, and
Sure.
could you expand on this vision?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you asked. So it all started from my child. I've always been an inquisitive child, and some people even found it annoying at some point. But I've always questioned the status quo from the youngest age. Like, as I remember, I was like, okay, cool, this is how we're doing things, but why? This is so cool. And adults, some adults found it quite annoying. It's like, I don't have to know, I don't have to expect myself to, and things like, yeah, it's working, but why? Surely it can be improved upon, right? It's like, we've done this for years, but why? So I've always been inquisitive in that sense. And some of the one question that has always bagged me was that growing up in the DRC, a country that is vastly blessed in terms of natural resources, in terms of intellectual capacity, a lot of I think at the time, 60% of the population was educated. And these are smart people. I mean, these are smart people. Yet the country was experiencing extreme poverty. That didn't make sense to me. I couldn't reconcile the two. We have all sort of natural resources. We have all sort of ecological resources and blessings. We have smart people. What are we missing? For us to emancipate ourselves and break through this poverty, and just for everybody to have the bare minimum, be able to put food on the table. That didn't make sense to me. Never made sense to me as a child. Never made sense to me as a teenager. Still doesn't make sense to me now as an adult. But I think I understand, and so that's where my vision came from, because the more I asked myself that question growing up, I started to realize, I started to examine the way things were being done. A lot of people were dependent on the economy, on the state, waiting on the government to provide jobs, so waiting on foreign aid, for instance, to go supply a certain village, a certain school with, I don't know, food or medical thing. Then I was like, that could be the problem. And the problem was also the educational system. We were taught, I realized that our mindset were still of the colonial time, in the sense that if you have an education, you'll be able to get out of the lot. If the more educated you are, the more responsibility you'll be given, and obviously you will have a better social standing, social life. And so people continue with that mindset, thinking that all you have to do to make it in life and to have a good life is to go to school, make sure you finish university, get a job, work hard 9 to 5, save enough. Maybe after 30 years, you'll be able to buy a car or buy a house or something like that. And so most of us were still in that cycle. And for me, that was the first problem that I've identified. I was like, okay, we need to break that, because that clearly doesn't work anymore. For one, there aren't enough jobs. And number two, even those who get jobs still don't make it, right? So we need to think outside the box. I realized, okay, but there are a few people that are quite successful that didn't even go to varsity, but they're running businesses. But why is nobody exploring that route? And I started questioning that and realized that because it's unsafe. It's an uncharted territory, right? Education, and this other route has been tried and tested for years. People knew for a fact that, especially back then, in the times of our parents, like if you finish varsity, chances are you get a job, and a good job, and you'll be able to provide for a family. But things have changed, times have changed. Nowadays, some people are making it as entrepreneurs, and so why are we not encouraging entrepreneurship? Because it feels almost as if it's a random thing. It's a game of chance. It happens to a select few. I disagree. I think that's a transferable skill that can be taught to anybody at any age. People can learn to think more innovatively, more entrepreneurial. And so my vision was born at that moment. I was like, I will make it my life vision to create a platform where entrepreneurship is promoted, trained, and entrepreneurs are trained, equipped so that they can make it. And also they will be exposed to successful entrepreneurs who will share their experiences. We will make this a safe route, a safe option for people, where it becomes a valid option. Instead of considering university, you consider entrepreneurship. So that way my vision was born. I just didn't know what was the phrase for that. I didn't know what it was until I came to varsity, and I discovered the launch lab. I was like, this is a vision. It's actually an incubator. And I started hearing about accelerators. I started hearing about all these things. Like, that's what I think. And then to conclude, I stumbled upon a book which has become a guide even for my own business, The Prosperity Paradox, subtitle being How to Lift Nations Out of Poverty Through Innovation, by Professor Clayton, Efosa Ojomo, and I think Karen. Um, it changed my life after I read that book, because the paradox there lies in the fact that we're trying to solve poverty by attacking poverty directly. For an AIDS, whether it be like, okay, going to a village, there's the need for water supply, you build a well. So you're attacking the problem directly. Or people need education, you build a school. You're attacking the problem directly. Whereas you should first consider the social setting, the historical background of that environment, instead of trying to provide a solution attacking the problem directly, right? So to solve poverty, you shouldn't try and solve poverty directly. You should try and understand the cultural background, the social setting, and try to change the mindset and solve that. Then you're solving actual poverty. So that's the paradox. And I was like, this guy gets it. Yes, I get it. So that's how my vision was born. I was like, yeah, that's what I'll strive to build that and make that happen. Yeah.
Speaking about this way of thinking, I love the paradox, by the way.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what is design thinking?
Interesting. Design thinking is a way of life. Okay, design thinking is a way of looking at the world. It's a pair of lenses that one puts on and look at the world in a different way. Put it in layman terms. Okay, design thinking is a tool that anyone can use to validate ideas, hypotheses, assumptions, and the cool thing about design thinking is that it's a tool that helps you understand, you know, and it helps you come up with the most innovative solutions, but keeping the human at the center, keeping the target audience at the center of your design. So in other words, it's a human-centered approach into solving problems, into validating assumptions. So that's what design thinking is about. It's answering it's about validating data, validating assumptions, right? I have this idea. Is it a viable business? So there's a certain process that one can follow to validate that post and answer that question, right? Without spending tons of money while keeping the human. Design thinking has been used by software developers instead of doing the whole way, old approach of you are a client, you have certain requirements. Okay, we take notes, we go lock ourselves up in the lab. 6 months later, we come meet up with users against the product. But it's about keeping the human at the center of the design, having that iterative feedback loop. Yeah.
So, in your opinion,
Yes.
how can governments actually apply this
Yes.
to solving the bigger problems,
Totally.
like eradicating poverty?
Yes. Design thinking has 5 stages, right? And the first stage of design thinking, so let me just name the 5 stages. You have empathize, you have define, you have ideate, you have prototype, and test. The first stage of design thinking, empathize, for me, I think is the solution. You can't solve a problem for someone for whom you have no empathy. And empathy is different from sympathy. You're not feeling sorry for someone and said, okay, cool, I feel bad for you. I'm going to work out something for you. Now, empathy, it's about, I want to understand you because I care about you. See, it going back to that all prosperity paradox things, right? Instead of attacking the problem directly, understanding the problem, understanding what's causing the problem. That's how you solve the problem. So to answer your question with the governmental approach, I think that's what they should do instead of coming up with youth programs and conferences and all these cool programs and things like that, they should really spend considerable amount of time in terms of understanding what's causing the problem in the first place. What's the historical backgrounds, the cultural, implications of that thing. So empathize first, living in the world of the human for whom you're designing something or you want to design something, seeing the world through the lenses, caring deeply about them. That's how, when you understand them, that's when you start hearing things that are not being said. I give you an example. Henry Ford, with his Model T automobile, the first car that he designed. You remember the famous quote that he says, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Well, in their minds, rightfully, that's what they thought they needed. But going deeper, you have to, horse is a noun, to find the needs, you need to convert that into a verb. What's the verb behind horses? Then you ask deeper questions like, why do you need a horse, by the way, right? Because I need to move my goods from this town to the other town. So the verb there is to move. What you need is to move. You don't need a horse. Okay, cool. Now all of a sudden we're thinking broadly, because we understand, because I understand you. And that's the problem. Sometimes the government will say, oh no, we've asked the people, they said they need a well. So we built them a well. No, but you don't care about them. You don't really understand them. What they're saying and what they need are two different things. Try to understand what they need.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
almost saying that here's this group of people
Yes.
and this is their problem,
Yeah.
but you're not asking them for the solution.
Mhm.
It's our job to, and people who are providing the solution, to come up with the best solution.
Absolutely.
All you need to understand is the problem, their pains, and everything that they're going through, how they're suffering,
Yeah.
and we provide the best solution.
Absolutely.
I think that I've heard this so many times where when businesses are getting feedback, they actually also ask for solutions.
Yes.
And of course, they build their solution based on what customers want
Totally.
instead of what the customers need.
Totally.
For someone that has an idea,
Yes.
like you mentioned, these individuals,
Mhm.
and they think that the solution is just
Totally.
they need money.
Mhm.
What is the first step
Yes.
after someone has an idea
Yes.
and actually wants to start a business?
Yes. So the first step would be finding out everything they need to know to validate that idea that it's worth pursuing in the same place, right? Before you spend time away from loved ones, because cost, it obviously, it always costs, boils down to money, but cost comes in different forms, right? So it could be time, energy. That time you're busy working on that business, you could be spending time with your loved ones, for instance. That cost is costing you that. So before you engage further on that, try to validate that hypothesis. I would say personally, try to define your target audience, your target market, and then engage with potential customers, right? To kind of ask, validate that assumption, right? As Steve Blank defined the startup being like a series of untested hypotheses. So all you have is a bunch of assumptions. This is a problem. It's worth pursuing. People would appreciate if somebody solves it. In fact, they will pay for it. These are all assumptions that needs to be validated. So first step, validate those assumptions. And you will find out that while doing that, you're going to learn so much that you can either pivot or you can have product market fit. Yes.
What does it mean to pivot?
Pivot, basically, it means changing your whole business model without firing your team. But pivot also in layman's terms is just about um, making a 180-degree turn, right? So you were going in one direction, solving one problem. You realize that this is not the right problem to solve, for instance, or it's not the right audience, changing the problem, right? Maybe you were targeting vertical farming in a certain environment, but then you realize that the more you're engaging with people, you realize that in fact the number one problem in these neighborhoods is security, and I think I have the skills to have that. So instead of solving that problem, you change. Now you start solving another problem, a problem of security, for instance. Maybe you have a better idea. So it's about changing the problem statements actually and
And
value proposition. Yeah.
and then how do you know when you need to pivot?
You will, in fact, it comes from the feedback you get, right? From engaging with potential customers, right? Imagine that it's like in statistics, you have that bell curve, right? That normal distribution. And what that tells you is a story. Say, imagine you targeting people on the x-axis, you have age, right? Maybe from 20 to 65. And on the y-axis, you have level of pain from 0 to 10. And so the more you're engaging with people, you realize that the people that are most affected with this problem are only in the age of 20 to 22 years old or 25 years old. The level of pain is only 2. So you realize that this is not worth pursuing, right? Because these are young people who are still studying. In 5 years' time, they might change their mind about these things. So things like that, for instance, right? And the pain level is not worth pursuing, and they won't even be able to afford the product if we develop for them. So that could be one of the reasons why you might want to pivot. But the other reason, which I think is actually the most important reason, is while engaging in this customer discovery process, this empathy exercise, is that you end up discovering the real need, the real need of actually the individuals, because they will be telling you one thing, but the more you engage with them, the more themselves they realize, and yourself you realize that actually this is not my biggest problem. My biggest problem is actually finding safe transport to work every day. And then at that point, you realize that, well, I actually can help with that. I can look into that and create maybe a business out of this. That's when you pivot as well. It's also about finding which is the biggest problem, the biggest need. Yes.
So what happens if someone is passionate about this idea
Yes.
and then they validate it and it turns out that
Yeah.
there's not a big enough need for this to actually become a business
Totally.
and not enough income
Yes.
or possible revenue that they could be generating?
Yeah.
And while in the discovery period,
Mhm.
they actually find out that, oh, this is the real problem.
Right.
But the second problem, they're not
Mhm.
quite passionate about it.
Uh,
So how does that individual
that's
continue?
an interesting one. So that's actually a very good point that you've raised. So the question of passion is a tricky one, because you don't have a business without a paying customer. Now, let's suppose that the second problem that they've identified, they are able to come up with a very interesting business model, a good value proposition, and make money out of it. So what my recommendation would be is that pursue that market, have it as a source of income to fund the one that you're passionate about. Because the one that you're passionate about, you're not able to generate income with it yet, but it's the one that provides you joy and happiness and fulfillment and satisfaction. But you need the one that brings in the money as well. So my recommendation would be, yeah, do what brings in the money so that you can fund the one that doesn't bring in the money. Yeah.
And is this the same advice that you would give to an entrepreneur who says, I want to start a business,
Yes.
but I don't have any money?
Yeah.
What do you tell to this individual?
hmm So that's interesting, right? So it's quite actually sad and challenging because when you go to in the West, for instance, one can raise funds even with just an idea, but in Africa it's very different concepts, right? It's, for you to raise funds without an idea, it's almost a miracle, right? I mean, without an MVP, it's almost a miracle. Only in the
What's an
ideation phase,
MVP?
it's a minimum viable product, right? So I mean the product that you develop that has the basic functionalities um, for actually your value proposition. Now, for that individual who has this idea and has no funds, there's a few things to look to consider. Does that person have a regular job? Okay. Or is that person unemployed? Okay. So if you have a regular job, because I've been in that position, I would say don't quit your day job yet. Right? This is something that you can do on the side, getting information, validating your hypothesis while, putting food on the table and keeping the lights on. So this is someone who has a job. I wouldn't advise you to just prematurely quit your day job that brings in the regular incomes because you're passionate about something. I would say take your time, get as much information as you can on the subject matter, engage with potential customers. And how do you know that you have a potential customer? This is an advice from Steve Blank, who's an American entrepreneur and investor. He said, when you pitch your idea to a potential customer and you see their pupils dilate and they want to grab the product out of your hand and say, yes, here's my money, I want this product, you have a potential customer. Because what you will see is that people will tell you that they would become your customer, but the moment you start charging them, they run away and they tell you it's too expensive, you're crazy, I can't pay this much for this product. So there's two things, right? So you need to be aware of that and make sure that you have potential customers. So this is someone who's working. Someone who's not working, then I would say make sure that you attend as many networking events as you can, because you never know. I've also seen people that have met angel investors, and just by sharing their ideas, and people say that I believe in this idea, I can support you by pitching, engaging in pitching competitions. Some people have been able to raise non-dilutive funds, right? I've seen this so many
Could you
times.
define that for us?
So basically, this is when someone gives you money without you having to sell any shares or giving them any equities in your company. So they're just basically giving money, but they're not taking any shares in the company. So that's known that
Just because they believe in
just
you,
because they believe in you,
a family friend, a
a
family
family,
member.
the family, friends, and fools, right? So so their family and friends, if the business works, if it doesn't work, they're fools. So anyway, so things like that. But I've also seen like a total stranger giving money to someone after they listen to their pitch at the pitching competition. I've had that experience here at the Launch Lab where I was a venture builder. One of the students that we were mentoring at the pitching event, someone after the event approaches them and said, "Can we have a chat?" And then I was like, "Tell me a bit more about the business." And then I was like, "I'd like to invest non-dilutive funds." Just like, so that's would be my advice, right? Try to find, okay, where are all these pitch competitions happening? Where are these entrepreneurs and angel investors gathering? Go in those places. The networking effect, try and mingle with as many entrepreneurs and investors and angels that you can find. Pitch your ideas to as many people as you can. And, the problem here is that somebody will tell you like, oh no, somebody will steal my idea. Dude, if somebody steals your idea, you're probably not the right person to build that business in the first place.
Or your
Right?
idea is not good
Oh,
enough.
your idea is not good enough. Like, let's face it, like in the whole wide world, you can't possibly think that nobody has thought about that than you, right? So that's the thing, and I've seen it many times. People come to me and say, "Oh, before I tell you about my business, sign the NDA." I was like, how do you expect me to help you if you don't trust me to begin with? In the ideation phase, it's very seldom that someone steals your idea. If you have like a very sophisticated product, yeah, have it patented, and things like that. So have people sign NDA, but still an idea, it's the wrong way to go about building a business. Yeah,
I want to go back to something you said about keeping your day job
yeah,
and working on your business maybe after hours
yeah,
or in your spare time.
yeah.
At what point does that individual leave their day job to actually pursue their business
Hmm.
full on? Could you give us some practical
Yes,
things to think about and do for
yes,
this
yes.
individual?
So there's a thing called runway, right? Runway basically is how many months, how much money do you have that, how many months can you survive with the money that you have in the bank, the cash that you have in the bank, right? And the moment you realize that you have enough runway, I would say that's a good indicator for you to maybe engage fully in this thing, especially if you see that it's starting to scale and requiring more of your presence, on a full-time basis, right? And by runway, I mean, it's basically, yes, if you are able, you'll be able to keep on the lights maybe for the next 6 months or the next 12 months without having an income, right? Based on the funds that you've raised, maybe, or based on the sales that you've made and things like that. At that point, yes, I would consider, maybe engaging at a full-time level on the business. But before that, it's very risky because it's an uncertain in setting and set environment. Anything can change anytime. And if you only have a runway of 2 months, for instance, and after 2 months, there's no more income, what do you do? Right. So,
Definitely. I mean, I think that there's two types of people.
yes.
For me, one, there's people that need the day job to have that stability
Yes.
and where they can focus on their side business in the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
And the second type of people actually need that pressure
Mm-hmm.
where there's no income at the end of the month
Sure.
and it's now or never.
Yes.
I have to, the quote goes,
Yes.
burn the ships at the shore.
I like that.
So the only way you're getting back
Yeah.
is if you get onto that island and you
Totally.
take the enemy ships, and that's how you're getting back home. So
Totally.
do whatever it takes.
Yes.
So personally, I'm like in between that. I don't think I'm completely burn the ships at the shore,
Yeah.
because I did have a day job and then I eventually left.
Mm-hmm.
But once more, uh, for me, your risk appetite
Mm.
as an entrepreneur has to be high.
Mm.
And you know this.
Totally.
What's your opinion on a risk appetite?
Oof, that's a very good one, right? So this is there are different type of entrepreneurs in my eyes, and how you differ even within the African context. Let's stay in the African context, depending on where you go in Africa. Like I said, if you go up north, because of the conditions of life being a bit harsher, right? There's almost a survival instinct. People do entrepreneurship for survival, whereas the more you go down south, people do, yes, some do entrepreneurship for survival, but it's not at the same rate. Okay. It's different where you have no choice than to do something to be able to provide for your family, put food on the table, right? If your business doesn't work, then your children are not eating. So that's different type of pressure, and someone knowing that, yeah, sure. I mean, even if the business doesn't produce, I'll still survive. So there are those entrepreneurs who like are more toward the survival spectrum, and the others that they're still okay. So it's like it's what you said exactly. So for those who are doing it for survival, for instance, it's a different type of pressure, it's a different type of drive, it's a different type of motivation. If you don't have enough drive, if you don't have enough hunger, entrepreneurship is hard. There will be days where you feel like throwing in the towel, but what keeps you going is the drive. If you know that if I don't keep going, then somebody is not eating tonight, you won't think about throwing in the towel. See, that's a different mindset.
That's a
Where
big why.
yes, exactly. It's a big why. What's your why exactly? That's the drive, right? What's driving you? But if you're doing it because I'm just passionate about climate and things like that, so I'm doing this business. But whether you do it or not, you're still fine. It's a different drive. Yes.
Yeah,
So
I hear you.
it's a balancing act, right? Some people need that pressure for sure. I'm sure when you have that pressure, you have a different drive. But it can also be toxic in a sense that because it's not a healthy drive in the sense that you're stressed, you're not thinking clearly, you're making irrational decisions. Your decisions are influenced by fear instead of calculated risk and things like that. So it's risky as well. It's not always a good thing to be under that type of pressure. It also healthy to not be under that type of pressure because you're a bit more rational. You can think critically, right? Yeah. So it's a balancing act.
I hear you. So
Yeah.
you're saying that on the one hand, we think short term, make short term decisions
Yeah.
because they need to put food on the table, they need to
Yeah.
provide right now.
Yeah.
And that can be to the hindrance of your actual business and idea in
Correct.
terms of growth and creativity. Where on the other hand, you have that flexibility, you
Yes.
can create, you can innovate, but maybe your growth is not going to be as fast as
Exactly.
this year.
Totally. Yes.
So it's for individuals to decide which end.
It's definitely for individual to decide, and that's where mentorship becomes important, right? I can't overstate the importance of having a mentor. Make sure you find someone who's been in that industry longer than you and learn from them. Someone that you can run to for questions and advice, right? It doesn't have to be anything formal. It's just someone that you see regularly, discuss your progress, your all. For me, you see, people ask me how do you differentiate between coaching and mentorship. Coaching is more short-term bursts, right? We have a goal that we're trying to reach maybe in a week's time, in a month's time. I think that's what will help you get there, right? And prepare you for that. Mentorship, it's a holistic approach. How's your life? How are you at home? Right? And how's the business going? It's the whole individual, and it's more long term because it's more on for personal development, which ultimately affects professional um, development as well. Yeah. So find a mentor. That's very important.
Speaking of mentorship and coaching,
Yes.
you are currently the CEO of Maloba Consulting.
Yes.
Could you walk us through some of your service offerings and how you actually help individuals
Totally.
and businesses?
Yes. Thank you for asking. So Maloba Consulting was born out of a deep empathy for the African continent. As I mentioned initially, that empathy that I had towards people affected, especially by extreme poverty and not being able to get out of there, being stuck there. And so reading the book, The Prosperity Paradox, opened my eyes and inspired me to start Maloba Consulting because I realized that one of the most effective ways that a lot of countries that were previously underdeveloped third world countries that are now emerging countries or even developed countries, a lot of them have been able to break the barrier of extreme poverty and emerge. It was through innovation. And innovation doesn't have to be extravagant. And innovation, it's also about non-consumption. It's about not going after only what people are going after. Everybody is in fintech now, so we're all going in fintech. It's about non-consumption, right? It's about serving those who can't afford. You have countries like in India, for instance, where there have been projects where there are a lot of projects where, for instance, microfinance or people starting a business, laundry business, for instance, going to a remote area where there's no electricity, there's no laundry and things like that. But someone thinks about bringing mobile laundry, for instance, that type of things. And all of a sudden, jobs provided, all of a sudden, some people are able to survive as well. So that type of innovations of non-consumption and also disruptive innovation, that's what we're targeting. And so that's how Maloba Consulting was born. It was to empower individuals to become agent of economic change, right? National economic change. And the way we do it, we have basically 5 core services. We're targeting startups, early stage startups to be specifics, and we offer them startup packs, for instance. So if you are in the, especially if you're in the ideation phase, it's anything from a pitch deck, anything from registering your business, having a landing page, having a media presence, designing a go-to-market strategy, and basic financing, balance sheet, income statements, and projections, that type of thing. And then the other service, of course, we also offer advisory services, gap analysis, consultations, and all that. The other services is for students. I'm a strong believer that entrepreneurship has got nothing to do with age. You can start entrepreneurship at any age, even at primary school. I strongly believe that, right? It's about the mindset shift. And so we want to cater for students, who can't afford high consulting fees for some of the consulting companies that are around there, or who are in maybe in tertiary institutions that has no entrepreneurial support, that type of thing. So that's one of our services there as well. We offer similar services to startups, but for students at a very low rate. The other group is a corporate setting. So the one thing that we've noticed is there's a thing called disruption innovation. And a lot of, and we know of big companies that have been disrupted in the past, right?
Could you give us an example?
I'll give you an example. For instance, let's take Nokia, for instance, which was once a major telecommunication company, I mean, a manufacturing company of telephones, but people hardly mention that name anymore now. What happens? There's a whole story behind that. They got disrupted, with Apple, for instance, and the computer,
BlackBerry.
the Blackberries, all those, the computer industry, just to name a few. A lot of companies have been disrupted like that. So because people think that they're at the top, there's nothing else to improve. And here comes a small startup that keeps on catering for non-consumption, and they're off your radar. And by the time you notice them, they're already growing at an exponential rate, and they're going to overtake you. That type of thing. And so we help corporates to avoid such dangers and remain innovative, and also to empower people like Daniel Maloba, who was once working at a corporate institution, who was bored on a daily basis. How can we incentivize employees? Because not everybody, of course, need to become an entrepreneur, leave their jobs and start a business, but while working at a corporate, but still being innovative. So training in that sense on innovation, training on design thinking and that type of thing, and leadership. So that's the other service. And another thing that we've noticed is that, like I said, there's a big difference between investment in the West and investment in Africa. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect the two worlds. So that program is called soft landing. So we try to bring investors and entrepreneurs and opportunities from outside to Africa so that they be exposed to the African entrepreneurial landscape. They can see the potential that lies here and de-risking that factor, because some people don't want to invest because they're just scared because of what they hear. And just being able to expose that and de-risking that factor of investment and in fostering that collaboration, enforcing that collaboration between the two worlds. That's soft landing program. So we help people from outside transition nicely into the African context. So that's another program that we offer. And the last one is general. This is someone who just want to improve their public speaking skills, someone who wants to prepare for an interview and things like that. So someone who wants to become a better storyteller, that type of training. So they also come. So that's what Maloba Consulting does in a nutshell.
Amazing. I just have a follow-up question on soft landing.
Yes.
Why is it that individuals from other countries are or see it as risky to actually invest in African continent or see Africa as second tier?
Totally. I mean, think about it, right? When you pick any popular book on entrepreneurship or startups, what are the chances that it was written by an African? Chances are that book was written by someone from outside Africa, even though it's about Africa. So the perspectives and the narratives are shaped by people who are outside from Africa. And so people, I feel, are misinformed about the reality within the African entrepreneurial landscape. All people hear and know is through the media and what to read, right? And media telling you that the economic or political states of X and Y country is very unstable. Obviously, I wouldn't want to go invest there. I wouldn't want to invest in any startup there because I'm like, what if it happens that tomorrow I lose that money? But what happens when I start bringing you in and you see for yourself that it's not as bad as you thought, right? It's actually, it's de-risking that fact, right? And informing people and helping them to see for themselves, to understand that empathy building almost to be able to come and see for themselves and experience for themselves and vice versa. Sending people from Africa to that world for them to meet them and realize that we African are also at the world-class level as well in terms of entrepreneurship. They're just as clued up as someone from Stanford University, right? Someone from Stellenbosch University is just as clued up as someone from Harvard University Business School, that type of thing. And all of a sudden, there's that de-risking factor that we're taking care of. So so that's the idea.
I love it.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is difficult and challenging.
Correct.
So could you describe an average day in the life of Daniel Maloba and how you actually mitigate the challenges and deal with all these obstacles?
Interesting. So one thing I do want to mention and emphasize on is that self-care is very important. So you got to prioritize that, right? One thing I really prioritize is exercising. I exercise at least 3 times a day for 1 hour, right? So that helps with my mental wellness.
Three
Uh,
times a day
I
for?
mean, not 3 times a day, 3 times a week. So, because
That's
I
very
don't have
interesting.
that much time. 3 times a week,
Teach
sorry.
me.
I wish. So, I've recently become a father, which means my sleeping time has also been reduced significantly. I need to find a way, a coping mechanism, right? And without exercising, I will simply burn out, right? So that's the way for me. So I would generally, I usually work best at night. Okay, so I'll probably go to bed around 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and wake up around 6 a.m., 7. Sometimes I'll push it to 8, but by 8, I'm at my desk working, right? And then, yes, I'm working throughout the day. I take my lunch break, and then after work, I go for workout, 1 hour minimum. I work out, I sweat, come back, take a shower, spend time with loved ones. At that point, no electronics. There's a rule in my household where between a certain period of time, there's no access to electronics or phones, laptops. If you try to reach me, if you're dying, call somebody else because I'm not going to be able to help you. It's as simple as that. Things because we prioritize quality time with loved ones and things like that. It can't be having quality time and we each on our phones. That's a disease that I see, and a lot of people do that. You can't be resting as well. I mean, resting is another thing that needs to be talked about, right? That could be a whole podcast on its own. What's resting? People think that resting is being on Netflix or in front on their phone on social media, but are you really resting? Being in front of a screen the whole time, watching something.
Just always stimulated.
Exactly. You have all these dopamine effects constantly. How are you resting? And so switching off that phone, and you'll find that how addicted you are to your phones actually, and how difficult it is to just switch it off and not touch it for an hour. That type of thing. So that would be a typical day in my life, yes. And but like I said, there's a period of time because I'm still early stage startup myself. I, I like I said, at night I work. I do have meetings at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. sometimes with people, and I would work afterwards.
You once told me that having a newborn baby is like having a new business.
That is true.
So, could you describe for us the
The
challenges with having a newborn
the
plus a new business?
oh, oh yes, because that's actually the perfect analogy when you think about it. Because as a new time parent, let's specify that factor as well. New time parents, it's your first child. You have no idea what you're doing. Because as a parent, you're winging it the whole time. It's very uncertain, but you only have one goal, one objective is to keep this little human alive and keeping them safe and keeping them satisfied, whether it be with food, whether it be comfort, whatever it is, that's your objective. How you do that varies from day to day. Sometimes you would have no clue why the child is crying. You have to figure it out. So the reason why I say that it's very analogous to starting a business is because sometimes you're entering a market, you have really no idea how that market really is until you've entered that market and start operating within it. And while you're doing that, you have to keep your business alive. And if you have a team, you have to make sure that there's enough runway to keep on paying your employees. So it's like I heard someone actually say that it's like imagine you building a car and you're driving that car at the same time, and there are people at the back seat, and you're making sure that you're fixing the engine at the same time, and the road is uncertain. There are potholes on the road. You have to avoid the potholes while moving the whole time. So it's like that, right? So that's the analogy there, especially when starting a business, is that you have to keep the business alive. You have to make sure that the business grows. You have to nurture that business, and you have to figure it out. It's an uncertain territory. Like Eric Ries defines a startup as like there's an element of extreme uncertainty that comes into it as well. So yeah.
Wise words. So, for individuals watching that are aspiring entrepreneurs
Yeah.
that want to actually start a business, have
Yeah.
an idea, want to start a business,
Yes.
or actually starting a business,
Yeah.
or actually, sorry, continuing in their business and
Yes.
may
Yes.
have certain challenges,
Yeah.
I want to know what sort of traits does these individuals need to have?
Like I think I've mentioned it earlier on. You need to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Okay. There's more than one way to solve a problem. Okay. So don't be fixated on one way of solving the problem. It's just gonna put you in a box. The one thing that you want to avoid is being in a box, right? Constantly think innovatively, constantly try to get outside of the box. Even if you find the business model that's working for you, always challenge the status quo. Okay. always remain hungry and innovative. Can we improve on this? Okay, but what are our customers saying? How they're satisfied? Always living in the world of your customers, always engaging with them and getting feedback from them. All right. Never assume that your business is doing well because your sales is increasing. Always hear from the masses hold. Are your customers satisfied? So this is for someone who is engaged in a business already, and for someone who's thinking of starting a business. I mean, like I said again, be in love with the people, not the business. Okay, so try to care deeply for the people and understand them, and make sure you understand the real needs of the people. Yes, if I have to give final advice, I would say that, look, being in Africa and facing the realities that we're facing, like of employment and extreme poverty in some areas and things like that, you can't survive with a mindset of dependency, right? You can't depend on the government's grant. You can't wait for foreign aids to come help you. You've got to realize quickly and soon, hopefully, that you need to take certain level of responsibility, okay, to make do with what you have and see how you can think innovatively to turn your circumstances around. And what I mean by that is that, yes, not everybody is called to be an entrepreneur, but if you have the passion to become an entrepreneur, don't be scared, right? Find like-minded people, because I'll tell you that's, like, as you know as well, entrepreneurship is a lonely road. It's very difficult, and there will be many times where you will question your reason for living. But that's not the point. So you need to make sure you're surrounded with the right people, right mindsets. If you feel you have that passion, that calling, let's call it calling for entrepreneurship. But if you don't have that, make sure you remain a thinker, right? Everybody can think. That's the one thing that's free. You don't have to pay for it. You can think, and you can ask for advice. You'll be surprised how quickly people are willing to give you advice, even strangers. Just, look, man, I really love what you're doing. Can I just get your input on A, B, C, and D? All right. Work on that. Keep on growing, and you will change the world. It's up to us to take charge, of the future that we want to leave behind us, the legacy that we want to leave behind us. It's up to us. Yes.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. I want to also
Yeah.
acknowledge you
Yeah.
before we end off by just saying thank you for your valuable input, your valuable work, your valuable time that you are giving, not just to your loved ones, but to society as a whole, to not just people in South Africa, but to people in DRC.
Yeah.
You're actually giving hope. You're not just talking about things, but you're doing things.
Correct.
So I want to acknowledge you for doing that. And just thank you for also being a part of my journey and coming aboard and helping us out here and always offering your piece of wisdom
course.
to me. So just thank you for that. And
Thank you.
I wish you all the best. in
Thank you
your
very much,
successful
Nelson. Thank you for
endeavors.
having me.
No problem.
Yeah, all the best with your business as well.
Thank you.